Hello, and welcome to the first video I'm doing in my new format when talking about RWBY. This is also going to be the first time I've ever done this. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a comment, liking, subscribing, favoriting, rating 5 stars on the video. Is that still a thing? Anyway, let's get into this video. I originally wanted this video to be about how the animation and direction for RWBY vs. the Furious Cat is solid, but I realized that there was one specific part of the fight that I truly wanted to analyze and talk about, which is this reverse shot between the cat and RWBY. Before doing that, I should at least quickly go over why I find the fight between RWBY and the Furious Cat to be so solid. That's because this reverse shot, is the culmination of everything that comes before it. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm not gonna spoil it for you. Right off the bat, the visuals and score of RWBY ascending into herself are solid. One of the things they do to help RWBY and Crescent Rose stand out in this dark void is surround RWBY's body and weapon with a red glow. This helps to prevent the black color of RWBY's hair and clothes from blending into the background. RWBY emerging from her ascension is also solid thanks to fantastic compositing and VFX work. An initial blast goes off that obfuscates everything and then immediately dissipates. Right after, a second, much larger blast goes off, which produces so much light it causes all the characters in the shot to become silhouetted. We are then brought to a shot of RWBY in a red and black silhouette. This shot would be 100% solid if it wasn't for the tree partly covering RWBY's silhouette. I digress. The direction here is solid due to the white star effect placed on RWBY's hip that will draw our attention. The reason why this is solid direction is because it prepares us for the next shot bringing us up close to what was shiny, which is RWBY's rose emblem. Capping this off is RWBY twirling Crescent Rose and ending in a pose in which RWBY is brimming with confidence. This is solid thanks to the dynamic and clear posing that effectively communicates how ready for anything RWBY is. The animators, sound designers, compositors, and VFX artists just completely pop off with how they handle the Furious Cat leaping towards and attacking RWBY. The vocal effect for the cat saying, "How perfect!" Just mwah, chef's kiss. These people even had the cat in the reflection of RWBY's eye. How many of you noticed that? Once the cat's and RWBY's eyes align, a slashing effect representing the cat's claws comes in, which can elicit a split second of suspense in the viewer. This can cause the viewer to be momentarily concerned about whether or not the cat's attack was able to hurt RWBY. Because of this concern, the choice to show RWBY parrying the Furious Cat's attack in slow motion helps to give the audience a chance to breathe a sigh of relief. The lighting, compositing, and VFX here are just splendid. RWBY and the cat's faces are the only things in focus in this first reverse shot before their fight begins in full, allowing the viewer to focus on both the cat's and RWBY's faces, which is helped by the aforementioned slow-mo, letting us see that, even though RWBY parried the cat's attack, the cat is undeterred by it. Also, check these impact frames out for when RWBY parried the attack.
Perfection.
Going back to how the cat is initially unfazed by RWBY. The cat remains confident that they can handle RWBY, seeing with their wide grin after parrying RWBY's retaliation and while countering back with their own. This confidence from the cat quickly changes to frustration as RWBY parries the cat's attack once again. The Fierce Cat then shows a look of surprise at RWBY. This is why this initial exchange between RWBY and the Furious Cat is solid. The cat was not expecting RWBY to be like this.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
The Furious Cat is forced to be completely on the defensive as RWBY pushes the cat back with her onslaught while also outmaneuvering the cat. Look at RWBY countering the cat as they try to grab her by shooting off her weapon, causing the backside of her weapon to hit the cat right in the jaw. Now RWBY's animation here has callbacks to the Red trailer and they are seamlessly moved between. My favorite attack RWBY does here is the spinning attack. Why I like it so much is due to the vertical motion of her weapon. To me, this really elevates the animation and makes it sing. It also makes me want to go, "Yes, RWBY, you inspired that fairy tale!" This fight ends with the Furious Cat almost turning the tables on RWBY when they are able to catch RWBY's weapon. However, RWBY did not let this setback deter her and not only dodges the cat's counter, but also reclaims Crescent Rose without the cat realizing it. The reason why this works so well and, more importantly, is believable is because of how the focus for this fight scene temporarily changes to the furious cat. Up to this moment, the focus of the fight scene had been entirely on RWBY, as she is who the camera is following and the one gaining ground. Thus, with this shift of focus onto the furious cat after grabbing hold of Crescent Rose, we are put in the furious cat's perspective. We lose track of RWBY because the furious cat lost track of RWBY, which is what makes the moment work and believable. Now, before I actually talk about the second shot reverse shot between RWBY and the furious cat in this fight scene, I want to explain the reason why this moment is so interesting to me. That reason is because it is an evolution, a better execution to how RWBY has done the shot reverse shot in its fight scenes over the years. So what I'm gonna do first is go over some of the previous uses of the shot reverse shot in RWBY fight scenes and explain their strengths and weaknesses. Doing this will help make clear how RWBY has progressed in this regard to make this moment between RWBY and the furious cat shine. The first one to cover is this shot reverse shot between Jaune and the Ursa Minor in episode 12 of Volume 2. This is doing two things: setting up and paying off a joke, and showing how much Jaune has progressed by having Jaune overwhelm the Ursa. I'd say the joke is well and good, but how this was done to show how Jaune is now able to handle a Grim like this on his own is kinda weak. The reason I say this is because it doesn't really communicate how Jaune has grown. All it's communicating is that Jaune can better swing his sword, which isn't where Jaune needed to get better. To understand what I mean, you just need to remember why Jaune struggled against an Ursa Major in Volume 1 and why he was ultimately able to defeat it. He was just attacking and invading. He wasn't using his shield to his advantage so that he could create an opening for a counterattack. That's why Pyrrha moved his shield up to block the Ursa's attack and give Jaune that opportunity for a counter. Where Jaune needed to grow is to learn when to attack and when to defend. That's why this example of shot reverse shot is weak, because it doesn't communicate this. It just communicates how Jaune is now able to attack faster and harder than before, which is communicated through the fast cuts back and forth between Jaune and the Ursa Minor. The next shot reverse shot to talk about is the one between Raven and Cinder in episode 13 for RWBY Volume 5. I'm going to go right off the bat and say this shot reverse shot comes off as pretty weak. The reason for this is due to how chaotic the frames of these two shots are. The previous one with Jaune was pretty wild due to the fast cuts, but the frames for those shots are nowhere near as busy as these two of Raven and Cinder. The characters are just moving so much, and the slashes for their attacks are almost in the center of the frame with each swing. Not only that, there are also special effects going on that are filling up the remaining space of the frame for both shots of Raven and Cinder. I just find myself having a hard time for my eyes to focus and latch on to anything. I find it hard to get a read on either of their faces. Raven's head starts center right of the frame, slides to the left side of the frame after the first swing, is centered on the second, and moves back to the left on the last swing. It then cuts to Cinder, who starts off on the center right of the frame and stays relatively there for the rest of the shot. If the viewer's eyes were focusing on Raven's face, before the cut to the reverse shot of Cinder, they would be looking at blank negative space. By the time their eyes will have reoriented over to Cinder, they may have little time to get a look at Cinder's face before she spins around. Now, these two shots may be like this by design. After all, what this moment is communicating is how hard Cinder and Raven are going at each other. So the craziness of the frame in both shots can be on purpose in order to emphasize this. The last example of shot reverse shot I'm going to talk about here is the one between Qrow and Tyrian in Volume 7, Episode 12. This is the strongest one so far thanks to key differences from the previous two. This shot reverse shot is also different from the one for Raven and Cinder, as it isn't about the actual fight between the two characters. First off, not only is Qrow attacking Tyrian in both shots, they are also talking to one another. These two close-ups of Qrow and Tyrian therefore help to emphasize how personal this is between the two of them thanks to the inherent intimacy of the shots. What this means is that what is being communicated is not the physical conflict between Qrow and Tyrian. What is being focused on and communicated here is the drama, the rivalry between them. The second reason why this shot reverse shot is strong is due to the composition of the frames for both shots. The entire frame is not being filled in or mostly filled in with positive space. There's plenty of empty negative space on the sides and top corners of the frames. This helps keep our eyes focused on the center of the frame and thus focused on the characters. The last reason why this shot reverse shot is strong is due to how it is not as wild as the previous two. Both shots are only seen once, not cut back and forth to multiple times like with Jaune's. Both shots also don't have so much extra stuff and additional motion that are competing for our attention, as was the problem for Raven and Cinder. This allows us to better acclimate to each shot and understand what is going on in them. The only weakness I would say this shot reverse shot has is how Qrow's swings of his scythe cause his weapon and arms to occasionally cover his face. This can make it hard to see Qrow talk due to his face being obfuscated. This isn't a problem for the reverse shot to Tyrian, as his face is almost always in clear view. That finally brings me back to RWBY and the Furious Cat. With these previous shot reverse shots covered, you can probably start to see what strengths and weaknesses from the previous examples are being utilized and getting addressed. You may think that the previous example of the shot reverse shot for Qrow and Tyrian closely resembles this one for the Furious Cat and RWBY, due to the similar compositions of the two shots. After all, it addresses the problem of Qrow's face being covered, as RWBY's face can be clearly seen. Most importantly, we can always see her eyes. Well, it actually happens once for a single frame, which is negligible, and when RWBY's face does get covered, again for a single frame, her eyes remain in clear view. What I would argue this shot reverse shot is more closely related to is the one for Jaune. This is because both of these are mainly about the characters and specifically showcasing things about them being Jaune and RWBY. This is the reason why I call this second shot reverse shot of the Furious Cat and RWBY a culmination of everything leading up to it, from the first shot reverse shot on. With these close-ups of the Furious Cat and RWBY, what this second shot reverse shot does is pose a question and then provide an answer. The question it poses when first on the Furious Cat is, why is the Furious Cat struggling? The reverse shot to RWBY provides the answer. This shot of RWBY, since it is so clear and easy to follow, effectively communicates multiple aspects about RWBY and how she is attacking the Furious Cat. First up is RWBY's expression. RWBY looks focused, determined, and unwavering with each swing of crescent rose. This is understood by how RWBY's face stays locked onto the Furious Cat's. How this shot of RWBY also provides the answer as to why the Furious Cat is struggling to handle RWBY's attacks is through the animation and effects. Especially with the effects, as they add splashes of red swirling around RWBY that at times takes the shape of crescent rose. What this does is imply how RWBY is attacking faster than we can initially perceive. Now, the interesting thing with RWBY's animation as she swings crescent rose is that it feels like there's a brief pause between each swing of her scythe. If you don't see this, it may become more clear if I put the shot of Qrow from the last example alongside RWBY here. What this short buffer between each swing RWBY takes with crescent rose communicates about RWBY is that not only is she focused, she is controlled. RWBY is not just wildly swinging her weapon at the Furious Cat, as was the case with Jaune, Raven, Cinder, and Qrow. What this communicates about RWBY is that she is attacking the cat with precision and intent, meaning that the reason why the Furious Cat has been struggling to handle RWBY is due to how RWBY is focused, determined, steadfast, and in control, which allows RWBY to move effectively and always be able to respond to anything the Furious Cat does. This is why the second shot reverse shot of the Furious Cat and RWBY is so interesting to me, and why it is a culmination to the fight between RWBY and the Furious Cat, as the reverse shot of RWBY explains why RWBY is fighting so effectively against the Furious Cat. I hope you enjoyed me going over this fight between RWBY and the Furious Cat, and why it is so solid. The fight is short, but dense with detail. While analyzing the fight for this video, I noticed a lot of unique effects work that I don't think they've done before. sparks flying off each time Ruby's scythe and the Furious Cat's claws clash, the unique impact effect for the Furious Cat's claws that seems to blend smears and distortions. Also, these small character colored jumping effects. I'm really happy that I ended up getting so far behind on my thoughts video series covering RWBY, as this exploration about the use of shot reverse shot is what I originally wanted to do with the fight for Qrow, Clover, and Tyrian in Volume 7. This allowed me to really show how this specific type of cinematography has been used in fight scenes throughout RWBY. Please let me know what you think about the video, and if there has ever been a specific aspect to a fight scene in RWBY that you felt really brought it all together.